Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez never imagined her morning patrol would become a fight for survival. The dusty streets of Fallujah stretched endlessly under the blazing Iraqi sun as her convoy moved through the narrow alleyways of the volatile city. At 28, Maria had already completed 2 tours in Afghanistan, but Iraq felt different. The tension here was thick enough to cut with a knife. Her team consisted of 5 soldiers, all seasoned veterans who trusted each other completely. They were conducting a routine reconnaissance mission, gathering intelligence on suspected insurgent activity in the Al-Anbar province. The radio crackled with updates from base camp as they navigated through the maze of concrete buildings and abandoned storefronts. Maria's instincts had kept her alive through countless dangerous situations. Today something felt wrong. The streets were too quiet. Children who usually played in the dust had vanished. Even the stray dogs that normally scavenged for food were nowhere to be seen. She motioned for her team to slow their pace and stay alert. The first explosion came without warning. A roadside bomb detonated 30 meters ahead, sending chunks of concrete and metal flying through the air. Maria's training kicked in immediately. She dove for cover behind a damaged vehicle, her rifle ready. Her team scattered, taking defensive positions as the echo of the blast faded into an eerie silence. Then the gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Muzzle flashes sparked from rooftops, windows, and doorways. Maria realized they had walked straight into a carefully planned ambush. The insurgents had chosen their location perfectly, creating a kill zone with limited escape routes. She counted at least 8 different firing positions surrounding their small patrol. Her radio operator, Private Johnson, was trying desperately to establish contact with headquarters. The communications equipment had been damaged in the initial blast, leaving them isolated and outnumbered. Maria knew they needed to move quickly before the enemy could adjust their positions and close off any remaining escape routes. The first bullet caught her in the shoulder as she attempted to advance toward better cover. The impact spun her around, but adrenaline masked most of the pain. She pressed herself against a crumbling wall, blood seeping through her uniform. The metallic taste of fear filled her mouth as she assessed their rapidly deteriorating situation. More bullets found their mark. One grazed her leg, another punched through her vest and lodged in her ribs. Each hit was like being struck by a sledgehammer, but Maria refused to go down. Her team needed her leadership. She continued returning fire, trying to suppress the enemy positions long enough for her soldiers to find better cover. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Maria lost count of how many times she had been hit. Her body was becoming increasingly unresponsive, but her mind remained sharp. She directed her remaining team members to a more defensible position, while she provided covering fire. As the sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the battlefield, Maria felt her strength beginning to fade. She had taken 11 separate bullet wounds, though she would not know the exact count until much later. Her uniform was soaked with blood, and breathing had become a conscious effort. Still, she continued to fight, knowing that surrender meant death for her entire team. The enemy fire gradually decreased as her team managed to establish a defensive perimeter in an abandoned building. Maria crawled through the debris, leaving a trail of blood behind her. She made it to the relative safety of the structure just as her legs finally gave out. Her vision began to blur, but she could hear the distant sound of helicopter rotors approaching. Hope flickered in her chest as she realized that backup might be coming. The helicopters that Maria heard were not coming for her team. They flew overhead without stopping, heading toward another crisis somewhere else in the city. The sound of their rotors faded into the distance, taking with it the brief moment of hope that had sustained her through the worst of her injuries. Private Johnson finally managed to get the radio working after stripping parts from a damaged communication device they found in the building. His voice was shaky as he transmitted their coordinates and casualty report to headquarters. The response was not what they wanted to hear. All available units were engaged in heavy fighting across multiple sectors of Fallujah. No immediate rescue was possible. Maria lay against a concrete wall, her breathing shallow and labored. She had managed to apply makeshift bandages to the worst of her wounds using strips torn from her uniform and medical supplies from her pack. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. She knew that without proper medical attention soon, she would not survive much longer. Her remaining team members had sustained injuries as well, though none as severe as hers. Corporal Stevens had taken shrapnel in his arm from the initial explosion. Specialist Davis was dealing with a bullet wound to his thigh. They were all running low on ammunition and water with no clear idea of when help might arrive. The building they had taken shelter in offered some protection, but it was far from secure. The insurgents had pulled back but were still in the area, occasionally taking potshots at anyone who moved near the windows. Maria could hear them communicating in Arabic, their voices carrying across the narrow street outside. As the hours passed, Maria drifted in and out of consciousness. During her lucid moments, she continued to command her team, ensuring they maintained watch positions and conserved their remaining resources. She made them promise to leave her behind if an opportunity to escape presented itself. None of them would agree to that order. The temperature inside the building rose steadily as the day progressed. Without adequate water, dehydration became another enemy they had to fight. Maria's lips were cracked and dry, her throat felt like sandpaper. She tried to ration her remaining water, knowing that her team needed to stay alert and functional. By afternoon, Maria's condition had deteriorated significantly. She was losing blood faster than her body could replace it, and infection was beginning to set in around some of her wounds. Fever made her delirious at times, causing her to drift between the present reality and memories of her childhood in Texas. The insurgents made several attempts to storm their position throughout the day. Each time, Maria's team managed to repel the attacks, but their ammunition supplies dwindled with each engagement. They began collecting weapons and bullets from fallen enemies, though venturing outside to retrieve them was extremely dangerous. During one particularly intense firefight, Maria managed to drag herself to a window and provide covering fire, while Specialist Davis retrieved ammunition from an insurgent who had fallen near their building. Her rifle felt impossibly heavy in her weakened hands, but she continued to squeeze the trigger until the enemy broke off their attack. Night began to fall over Fallujah, bringing with it a different set of challenges. The temperature dropped dramatically, and Maria found herself shivering uncontrollably despite her fever. Her team took turns keeping watch while others tried to rest, but sleep was nearly impossible given their precarious situation. Radio communication with headquarters became sporadic as atmospheric conditions changed with the darkness. When they could make contact, the news was always the same. No rescue teams available, hold your position, help is coming. But Maria knew that help might not arrive in time for her. As she lay in the darkness listening to the distant sounds of gunfire from other parts of the city, Maria began to accept that she might not make it home. She thought about her family, her parents who had immigrated to America for a better life, her younger brother who looked up to her. She had joined the military to serve her country and protect the freedoms she had grown up taking for granted. Now bleeding out in a ruined building thousands of miles from home, she wondered if her sacrifice would mean anything. The second night in the abandoned building tested everyone's limits. Maria's fever had worsened, causing her to slip in and out of delirium. Her team members took turns monitoring her condition while maintaining their defensive positions. They shared their water rations with her, even though their own supplies were critically low. Specialist Davis had fashioned a more effective bandage system using materials scavenged from the building. He had some basic medical training and did his best to clean Maria's wounds and prevent further infection. The process was agonizing for her, but she bit down on a piece of cloth and endured the pain without crying out. The insurgents had changed their tactics during the night. Instead of direct assaults, they were using psychological warfare. They would call out in broken English, taunting the trapped soldiers and making threats about what would happen when they were eventually captured. They also used sound tactics, banging on metal objects and creating loud noises to prevent the Americans from getting any rest. Private Johnson managed to establish brief contact with a forward operating base about 20 kilometers away. The communication was filled with static, but he was able to confirm their position and update their casualty status. The officer on the other end promised that rescue teams were being organized, but warned that it might take another day or two due to ongoing operations throughout the region. Maria's condition continued to deteriorate as dawn approached. She had lost a significant amount of blood, and her body was struggling to maintain basic functions. Her skin had taken on a pale, gray color, and her pulse was weak and irregular. Despite this, her mind remained surprisingly clear during her conscious moments. She used these lucid periods to share important information with her team. She told them about her emergency contacts, messages she wanted delivered to her family, and tactical advice for surviving until rescue arrived. She also made them promise to tell the complete story of what happened, ensuring that the heroism of her entire team would be recognized. As the sun rose on their second day in hiding, the team faced a new crisis. Their ammunition was nearly exhausted, and they had identified at least 15 insurgents in the surrounding buildings. The enemy seemed to be preparing for a major assault, moving weapons and personnel into position during the early morning hours. Corporal Stevens suggested that the mobile members of the team should attempt to break out while Maria provided covering fire from their current position. She immediately rejected this plan, knowing that she was too weak to hold off a determined attack by herself. She insisted that they stay together and fight as a unit regardless of the odds. The first wave of the assault came at mid-morning. Insurgents attacked from 3 different directions simultaneously, using rocket-propelled grenades and automatic weapons. Maria dragged herself to a firing position and began engaging targets with her rifle. Despite the excruciating pain that each movement caused, her marksmanship was still deadly accurate, even in her weakened state. She managed to eliminate 2 insurgents who were attempting to flank their position from the east side of the building. Her team fought with desperate courage, knowing that this might be their final stand. The battle lasted for nearly 2 hours. When it was over, 7 insurgents lay dead in the street outside their building. The remaining attackers had withdrawn, but everyone knew they would be back. Maria's team had expended almost all of their ammunition in the fight, leaving them virtually defenseless against another assault. During the lull in fighting, Private Johnson received an unexpected radio transmission. It was not from their usual headquarters, but from a special operations unit operating in the area. The voice on the radio identified himself as a Navy SEAL team leader who had been monitoring their situation. He informed them that his unit was planning a rescue operation. The SEAL explained that they had been tracking the insurgent activity in their sector and were preparing to neutralize the enemy forces surrounding the building. However, he warned that the rescue would not happen immediately. His team needed time to position themselves and coordinate with air support assets. Maria felt a surge of hope when she heard this news, but she also realized that she might not survive long enough to see the rescue. Her wounds were becoming infected despite their best efforts to keep them clean, and she was running a dangerously high fever. She began to prepare herself mentally for the possibility that she would not make it out alive. As afternoon turned to evening, she gathered her team around her and shared her final instructions. She told them about the importance of their mission and how proud she was to serve alongside them. She made them promise to take care of each other and to never forget the bonds they had formed during their time together in combat. The SEAL team had been operating in Fallujah for 3 weeks, conducting classified missions against high-value targets. Team leader, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson received the distress call about Maria's trapped patrol while his unit was preparing for another operation. The location of the surrounded soldiers was deep in enemy territory, making any rescue attempt extremely dangerous. Thompson studied satellite imagery and intelligence reports about the area where Maria's team was trapped. The building they occupied was surrounded by a network of insurgent positions that had been reinforced over the past 2 days. At least 20 enemy fighters were confirmed in the immediate vicinity, with more scattered throughout the neighborhood. The SEAL team consisted of 8 highly trained operators, each with specialized skills in combat, medicine, communications, and explosives. They had access to advanced equipment and could call upon helicopter gunships for support, but the urban environment limited their tactical options. Any rescue operation would require precise timing and flawless execution. Chief Thompson made contact with Maria's team during their second evening in the building. He was struck by the professionalism and courage in her voice, despite her obvious physical distress. She provided detailed intelligence about enemy positions, weapon placements, and the best approach routes to their location. Her tactical awareness impressed the seasoned SEAL operator. The rescue plan required extensive coordination with multiple military units. Air support would be provided by Apache helicopter gunships that would suppress enemy positions during the extraction. A quick reaction force would establish a security perimeter, while the SEALs penetrated to Maria's location. Medical evacuation helicopters would be standing by to transport casualties to a combat surgical hospital. Weather conditions complicated the planning process. A sandstorm was forecast to move through the area within the next 24 hours, which would ground aircraft and reduce visibility to near zero. The rescue had to be completed before the storm arrived, or Maria's team would be trapped for several more days. As the SEALs prepared their equipment and rehearsed their assault plan, Maria's condition continued to worsen. Her fever peaked during the night, causing severe delirium and convulsions. Specialist Davis did everything possible to keep her stable, using cold compresses made from their remaining water supplies to bring down her temperature. The insurgents launched another probing attack just before dawn, testing the defenses of Maria's position. Her team managed to repel the assault using their last magazines of ammunition, but they were now completely defenseless, except for their sidearms and 2 grenades. They knew the next enemy attack would likely overrun their position. Chief Thompson monitored the firefight through intercepted radio communications and decided that the rescue could not wait any longer. He accelerated the timeline for the operation, even though it meant conducting the assault in broad daylight with reduced air support. The risk was enormous, but Maria would not survive another night without medical attention. The SEAL team moved into position during the early morning hours, using a network of tunnels and drainage systems to approach Maria's location without being detected. Each operator carried specialized equipment for urban warfare, including breaching charges, night vision devices, and advanced communication systems that allowed them to coordinate with supporting units. At exactly 0800 hours, the rescue operation began. Apache helicopter gunships engaged the insurgent positions with rockets and cannon fire, creating massive explosions that shook the entire neighborhood. The coordinated airstrike eliminated several enemy strongpoints and forced the remaining insurgents to take cover. Under the cover of this bombardment, the SEALs advanced toward Maria's building using stealth and superior tactics. They moved through the chaos of the airstrike like ghosts, eliminating enemy sentries and clearing obstacles from their path. Their years of training and combat experience were evident in every movement. Meanwhile, Maria's team prepared for what they believed might be their final battle. They could hear the explosions getting closer and see smoke rising from nearby buildings, but they were not sure if the gunfire represented rescue or simply another phase of the ongoing conflict in Fallujah. Private Johnson tried repeatedly to establish radio contact with the rescue force, but the electronic jamming equipment used by both sides made communication nearly impossible. They could only wait and hope that help was actually coming, while preparing to defend their position against whatever happened next. The sound of controlled explosions and precise gunfire began to move closer to their building. Maria, despite her critical condition, recognized the difference between the random violence of street fighting and the methodical approach of professional soldiers conducting a planned operation. She managed to whisper to her team that rescue was finally at hand. Chief Thompson's voice suddenly crackled through their damaged radio, clear and authoritative. He identified himself and requested immediate confirmation of their exact position within the building. The sound of his voice was like a miracle to the trapped soldiers who had spent nearly 48 hours believing they might never see home again. The sound of boots on concrete stairs echoed through the damaged building as the SEAL team advanced toward Maria's position. Chief Thompson led his operators with methodical precision, clearing each room and stairwell to ensure no insurgents remained hidden inside the structure. The air was thick with dust and smoke from the ongoing bombardment outside. Petty Officer Sarah Mitchell, the team's medic, was the first to reach Maria's location. She immediately assessed the wounded sergeant's condition and began emergency treatment procedures. Maria had lost consciousness again. Her breathing was shallow and her pulse was barely detectable. Mitchell quickly established an intravenous line and began administering fluids and antibiotics. The medical evaluation revealed the full extent of Maria's injuries. 11 bullet wounds had created a complex pattern of damage throughout her body. Several bullets had fragmented upon impact, creating internal bleeding that required immediate surgical intervention. Her left lung had partially collapsed, and she showed signs of severe infection and blood loss. Chief Thompson coordinated the extraction while his medic worked to stabilize Maria. The other members of her patrol were also treated for their injuries and prepared for transport. The entire rescue operation needed to be completed within the next 20 minutes before enemy reinforcements could reorganize and mount a counterattack. Outside the building, Apache helicopter gunships continued to provide covering fire against insurgent positions. The Quick Reaction Force had established a secure perimeter, but enemy fighters were regrouping in buildings throughout the neighborhood. Radio intercepts indicated that a large force of insurgents was moving toward their location. Petty Officer Mitchell made the critical decision that Maria could not survive transport in her current condition. She performed an emergency procedure to re-inflate the collapsed lung and administered powerful medications to stabilize her blood pressure. The work had to be done quickly and under combat conditions, with explosions shaking the building around them. The evacuation began with Maria being carefully moved onto a stretcher designed for combat casualties. 4 SEALs carried her while the remaining team members provided security and assisted the other wounded soldiers. Every movement had to be coordinated to avoid further injury to the critically wounded sergeant. The route to the landing zone required moving through 200 meters of open street that was partially controlled by enemy forces. Chief Thompson called in additional airstrikes to suppress hostile fire during the evacuation. The timing had to be perfect. They needed to move during the bombardment but reach safety before the aircraft had to withdraw. Maria regained consciousness briefly during the evacuation. Through her pain and medication-induced haze, she saw the faces of her rescuers and realized that the nightmare was finally ending. She tried to speak but could only manage a whispered "thank you" before losing consciousness again. Petty Officer Mitchell continued monitoring her vital signs while the team moved toward safety. The medical evacuation helicopter was already waiting when they reached the landing zone. The aircraft's crew had been briefed on Maria's condition and had prepared specialized equipment for treating critical battlefield injuries. The transition from ground transport to air evacuation took less than 60 seconds. As the helicopter lifted off, Maria's team members watched from stretchers in the cargo compartment. Corporal Stevens, despite his own injuries, held Maria's hand during the flight to the combat surgical hospital. He whispered updates about their location and assured her that everyone had made it out alive. The flight to the medical facility took 18 minutes, during which Petty Officer Mitchell and the helicopter's flight medic worked continuously to keep Maria stable. Her blood pressure dropped twice during the journey, requiring immediate intervention with additional medications and fluids. Every minute was crucial for her survival. The surgical team at the combat hospital had been alerted about Maria's incoming arrival and was prepared for immediate operation. As soon as the helicopter touched down, she was rushed into the operating room where military surgeons began the complex process of repairing the damage caused by 11 bullet wounds. The surgery lasted for 6 hours and required the skills of multiple specialists. Surgeons removed bullet fragments, repaired damaged organs, and worked to stop internal bleeding that had continued despite their earlier interventions. Several times during the operation, Maria's condition became critical, but the medical team managed to stabilize her. Chief Thompson and his SEAL team remained at the hospital until they received word that Maria was stable and expected to survive. They had completed one of the most dangerous rescue operations of their deployment, bringing out 5 wounded soldiers from deep inside enemy territory without losing a single person. News of the successful rescue operation spread throughout the military command structure in Iraq. The combination of Maria's heroic leadership during the initial ambush and the SEALs' daring rescue mission became an inspiration for other units operating in dangerous areas of the country. When Maria finally woke up 3 days later, she found herself in a hospital bed surrounded by flowers and cards from fellow soldiers. Her first words were questions about the welfare of her team members. She was relieved to learn that everyone had survived and was recovering from their injuries. Recovery was a long and difficult journey that tested Maria's determination as much as her original fight for survival in Fallujah. The medical staff at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany carefully monitored her progress as she underwent multiple surgeries to repair the extensive damage caused by her wounds. Physical therapy began within days of her arrival, focusing on restoring basic motor functions. The psychological impact of her ordeal was as challenging as the physical recovery. Maria experienced nightmares and flashbacks that transported her back to that abandoned building in Iraq. Military psychologists worked with her to process the trauma and develop coping strategies for dealing with survivor guilt and post-traumatic stress symptoms. Her family arrived from Texas within a week of her evacuation from Iraq. Seeing their faces for the first time since the ambush brought Maria to tears, finally allowing her to release emotions she had suppressed during the crisis. Her parents had aged visibly during the weeks of uncertainty about her condition, and her younger brother had enlisted in the army while she was missing. Chief Petty Officer Thompson visited Maria during her recovery in Germany. He brought letters and gifts from his SEAL team, along with updates about the ongoing situation in Fallujah. The building where she had made her stand had become a strategic position for coalition forces, and her tactical intelligence had been used to plan successful operations against insurgent networks in the area. The media attention surrounding her story was overwhelming at first. Military public affairs officers helped manage interview requests from news organizations around the world who wanted to tell the story of the female soldier who survived 11 bullets in the elite rescue mission that brought her home. Maria was initially reluctant to speak publicly about her experience. Physical rehabilitation required months of intensive therapy to restore function to limbs affected by her gunshot wounds. She had to relearn basic tasks like walking and writing, as nerve damage from bullet wounds had affected her coordination. The medical team was amazed by her progress and determination throughout the recovery process. During her rehabilitation, Maria maintained contact with the other members of her patrol who had shared the ordeal in Fallujah. Private Johnson had been promoted and was completing his service with distinction. Corporal Stevens had recovered fully from his injuries and was training new soldiers based on lessons learned from their experience. Specialist Davis had been awarded a medal for his medical care under fire. The military recognition for Maria's actions came in the form of the Silver Star, one of the highest decorations for valor in combat. The citation praised her leadership under extreme conditions and her refusal to abandon her team, despite life-threatening injuries. Chief Thompson and his SEAL team received their own decorations for the successful rescue operation. As Maria's physical condition improved, she began speaking at military events and veteran organizations about her experiences. She discovered that sharing her story helped other veterans deal with their own combat trauma and inspired active duty soldiers facing dangerous deployments. Her message focused on the importance of teamwork and never giving up hope. The decision about her military future required careful consideration of both her physical limitations and her desire to continue serving. While she could not return to combat operations, Maria found new purpose in training roles that allowed her to share tactical knowledge with soldiers preparing for deployment. Her experience became valuable curriculum for survival and leadership courses. Years after her recovery, Maria established a foundation to support wounded veterans and their families. She used her public speaking skills and media connections to raise awareness about the challenges facing soldiers returning from combat. The foundation provided financial assistance, counseling services, and advocacy for improved veterans' health care. The bonds formed during those 48 hours in Fallujah remained strong throughout the years. Maria's patrol team held annual reunions where they shared updates about their lives and families. Chief Thompson and several members of his SEAL team also participated in these gatherings, cementing friendships that had been forged under the most extreme circumstances. Maria eventually married and started a family, though she maintained her connection to the military community through her advocacy work and speaking engagements. Her children grew up understanding the importance of service and sacrifice, inspired by their mother's example of courage and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. The story of her survival became part of military training curricula, studied by officers and enlisted personnel as an example of effective leadership under pressure. The tactical decisions she made during the ambush, her team's defensive actions, and the coordination required for the rescue operation provided valuable lessons for future military operations. Looking back on that defining experience in Fallujah, Maria reflected on how those 48 hours changed not only her own life, but also the lives of everyone who was part of the story. The ordeal had tested human limits of endurance and courage, but it had also demonstrated the power of teamwork, determination, and the unwavering commitment of military professionals to leave no one behind.